A St. Louis Blues insider reveals shocking details on a surprising Blues trade that is on the horizon as things escalate heading into next season, and Jim Montgomery having multiple players that are emerging to hop into the top six. All signs are leading to something changing within this Blues organization. We're going to break down all this, reports, who could hop into the top six, and so much more later on this episode. Before we get into that, if you're part of the 51.4% watching this and you haven't hit the subscribe button yet, we're trying to reach our goal of 4,000 subscribers, so make sure to go down and hit that subscribe button. It's completely free, and in return, we'll give you updates from all around the Blues heading into and farther into next season. But with that, dears, let's just hop straight into it today, where we know the St. Louis Blues have had a busy offseason. They went out to get Lucic on a PTO. They're adding positional needs by bringing in Bukestad and Suter. But the biggest question mark around this Blues team has been defense, after seeing a lot of young players set to make the lineup, and that goes straight into the Jeremy Rutherford report on The Athletic. This will be linked down below, and he said the team's trade talks with Buffalo Sabres regarding Bowen Byram cooled before he resigned, but all it takes is a phone call. Likewise, clubs still like Jordan Kyrou. Now, Darius, what is your thoughts on this? Because Kyrou's name has been floating around a lot. We've seen him linked to Buffalo and Bowen Byram, but with this team still looking to upgrade on the back end, do you think there is a world that Jordan Kyrou could be on the way out?
It's very interesting. And first of all, I just want to say that I have a friend who's a Chicago Blackhawks fan. He said it's ridiculous that about half of you are not subscribed to the channel. So make sure you hit that subscribe button. But again, I think it's a little crazy that this report, Jeremy, is just throwing that out there at the end. Bowen Byram, that's very interesting information, right? And the truth has finally come out that obviously it cooled down a little bit sooner than all of us realized. But of course, there was some smoke there. That's an interesting tidbit from this summer. But then right at the end, he's like, hey, by the way, everybody still likes Kyrou and would be open to trading for him. So that is pretty insane to just kind of throw that out there at the end of the summer here. Of course, training camp is about to open in a couple weeks. Everybody's going to report. It's more likely that Kyrou is going to stay on this team, I think, long term, first of all, and obviously to start the season. But the fact that he's throwing that out there, I think is very interesting. We've been talking all summer about how there has been some smoke, and there was definitely some smoke between the Blues and the Montreal Canadiens. The trade did end up happening. Of course, it didn't include Jordan Kyrou, but there was some smoke there, and there was definitely smoke around Jordan Kyrou before his no movement clause kicked in on July 1st. Now, there's a bunch of teams that are interested. It's a little bit harder now to trade him if you wanted to, and if other teams are interested, if he doesn't want to go there, because of course, he has a no movement clause at this point, makes $8.1 million. Of course, is a great player for that dollar amount. You're getting 70 to 80 points a year. That's great value. Of course, in the regular season, there have been some question marks in terms of his playoff performances, but obviously does have some playoff points to his name. But I think it's very interesting that, again, Jeremy's just throwing this out there, that other teams are still interested. They're still kicking tires. I think this was more Doug Armstrong, at least, looking back hindsight 2020 this summer, throwing a name like this out there to gauge interest. What can we get for a player of this caliber who makes this amount of money for this many years still? I think that was more what it was about. And testing the waters for Alex Steen as well in the future if things do, for some reason, go south. So that's kind of what I think it was more about. But the fact that, some teams are still interested, I wonder if there are still discussions going on through the summer because, we made jokes all summer about Doug Armstrong going fishing. I don't think he was fishing for that long. I think he was, he's been in office making some things happen. So it's going to be interesting to see how this progresses. Ultimately, I don't think he's going to be traded because it's too difficult for everyone involved at this point to make it happen unless Kyrou absolutely wants to go to another team, which I don't think is the case at this point. So I just think it's very interesting that they're gauging interest and they're keeping, their finger on the pulse on this per se, in terms of, if this does go south, if it is something where, a situation arises where we do want to move off this player, and we'll get to why they might want to do that in the future in a second. I think they're still just keeping the door creaked open a little bit.
And it seems like Doug Armstrong went with the boys for the weekend, but he's back in office, so things are going to pick up. They're going to ramp up as we're getting closer to it. Yes, Bowen Byram has been linked to the team. Listen, Bowen Byram's a great player. Would love him in the organization, but I don't think it makes sense moving on from Jordan Kyrou to add a left-handed defenseman when you're looking at an already stacked left side with Broberg and Fowler. But the big thing with this team is, and it kind of goes into Jim Montgomery, we're looking at a team that has a lot of young young talent waiting to emerge in this lineup. A lot of guys in the bottom six that are waiting to break through, and I think it goes straight into someone like Jake Neighbors. Now listen, Jake Neighbors, one of the prime players for a breakout. I did a full video on this as well. Scoring 22 goals last year, coming off a 27 goals season before that. The biggest thing with Neighbors as well is how much trust he's got from Jim Montgomery. Looking at last year's playoffs, there's only 3 forwards in Thomas Booch and Shen that played more ice time. We know right now Jordan Kyrou was just behind, but seeing this coming from a 22-year-old, we see Jim come in and give him this ice time. Do you think there's a world where we're going to see him jump into the top 6? And I think that's almost going to spark more trade rumors where they're trying to make room to get him in there.
Yeah, not only him, but another player we'll get to in a second. But Jake Neighbors was absolutely unbelievable last year. I think most fans could agree. We see the comments. Everybody's in love with Jake Neighbors. He's going to continue to take steps forward. He's still a young player in this league, even though it seems like he's been around for a while at the NHL level already. So he's going to continue to take steps. Like you mentioned, he's being trusted by his coach in Jim Montgomery to play in different situations, play a lot of ice time, only behind a handful of players on this team. And most of them are established players in the NHL and are relied upon to play those minutes, of course, and against the toughest competition. So I feel like that speaks volumes. We know that Jim Montgomery loves his guys, whether when he was in Boston, obviously in St. Louis, he loves guys like Cam Fowler, obviously Jake Neighbors, Tyler Tucker. He said he's a huge fan of a guy like that. So he's going to get a lot of ice time this year. So I think that Neighbors can possibly step into that top 6 role. It sounds like he's probably going to get a lot more ice time, maybe even more than he was already getting by Jim Montgomery, because this is a player that he trusts. So I think that you know, a leap is inevitable at this point, and I think it's pretty exciting for Blues fans. I think a lot of people are very high on this player. Again, he's still making his way through the league. I feel like once you get to like 24, 25 years old, that's when you're really established in the league. So he's still making his way towards that, but he's putting up encouraging numbers. And I just wonder if he can take that leap in terms of point production, but in terms of like play and, you know, the fact that he's a tool that the coach obviously likes and knows how to use and, you know, will give him more ice time. I think that's good news heading into next year.
And I mean, the biggest thing is looking at him as well. He's not going to only go out and score you 20 plus goals, but he's also a physical specimen. 173 hits the year previous, 138. He's continuing to play the style that Jim Montgomery likes. We know the Boston Bruins in the East play a heavy style and more compared to what the rest of the East does. So he trusts his guys like this a lot more, and I wouldn't be surprised, and I'm almost willing to bet that he's going to have a 30-goal year coming into the season, but it goes straight into 2 guys that are not on the roster yet. We know Dvorsky, we speak on him and Carbonneau constantly, but looking at 2 of these players, Darius, if one or both are ready to jump into the lineup, if both of them come out of the gate swinging, they take over in training camp, they make the team, they need to emerge in the top 6 or middle 6. Do you think this almost puts Doug in the position to say, hey, if these guys are performing this early, maybe we can move on from one of the players in the top 6 to add a need on defense?
Yeah, I don't know if we're at that point yet, right? But maybe in a year's time it can get to that point. We don't know what's going to happen with Justin Carbonneau. I have an idea that he's probably going to go back to junior, that's for sure. But there is a real world where he could make a really good impression and make the team. But ultimately, I think he goes back to junior, continues his development, all of those things, and then obviously Dvorsky, I think, is right there. Dvorsky could probably play in the NHL at this point, but I feel like he's being pushed down because obviously the team wants to make it very difficult for younger players. And I think this is a good thing, by the way, for younger players to make the team. They have to rise above the rest and show that they can put up points consistently at the NHL level. So they're making it difficult for these younger guys to make the team. So to me, Dvorsky could probably play in the NHL, but they have a lot of, really good players, role players. So it might be a little less likely, and that's okay. He can continue his development. But in terms of, looking a year ahead, I would imagine Dvorsky is going to be a full-time NHLer next year, right? So where does that leave some of the guys, especially on the wing? I don't think he's going to start on the wing, especially because you signed Suter to a 2-year deal. So you have some term there, right? So, and you still have obviously Braden Shen locked up, Robert Thomas obviously locked up. So, you have these guys locked up at center. I would imagine Dvorsky comes in on the wing. Then there's a bit of a logjam, and then you have Carbonneau coming up. You have a plethora of young prospects. So I think that they're probably going to take one of these prospects or maybe a couple of them and flip them for defensive help because they're going to need that probably sooner rather than later at this point. We already saw it with the Mayu trade, and they're taking a bit of a not a risk. Obviously, Bolduc, you know what you have in him, and he was going to get better. But Mayu, if it works out for what they acquired him for, it's going to look like a great move. So obviously, you need to add more on defense because this defense core is not getting any younger. So I feel like the Blues are in a really good position. Very similarly to what they do in baseball, where you just accumulate all these draft picks, all of these young players, and draft in, whoever the best players, it doesn't matter what position. And then if you need to go out and fill a position of need, then you trade some of those prospects. So I feel like the Blues are kind of going through that structure right now. Not saying that they're going to trade Dvorsky, but I do wonder that, if they trade some of their younger prospects that do have high upside for some defensive help. And then as well, in a year, maybe 2 years, you're looking at Kyrou maybe going out the door because you have guys like Carbonell coming in who looks like he's going to be a great player in the new age power forward.
And I mean, Blues fans, what is your thoughts on this? We know how good and how much this team progresses to get better. We have young talent oozing through the lineup, through the juniors, through any league with this Blues organization. They're going to continue getting better. And yes, they have some aging players, but they still have a very young core. Would you move on from any of the players to move someone up into the top 6? Would you move on from Jordan Kyrou to get Jake Neighbors more time, or even put Neighbors or someone else onto the third line? Let us know down in the comments. And speaking of comments, we'll go straight into comment of the day. And this was talking on Robert Thomas not being in the top 10 of centers. He's one of the top passers in the league, maybe number 1. His shooting skills have got better. At this pace, he'll be easily in the top 7 or 8. And I could not agree with this anymore. He's going to continue to get better day after day. And it wouldn't surprise me if we see a ranking come out at some point next year, even having him into the top 6. Now, listen, that might be a little unrealistic, but Thomas continues to get better. He's still very young, playing on the top line, and the Blues are going to make a statement this year, and Robert Thomas is going to lead the way. But Blues fans, go down and leave a comment. You could be featured on Comment Today. While you're down there, leave a like, subscribe, share this with your friends. We'll be back in another episode, so keep your eye out for that. But I've been your host, Mark, with my co-host, Darius, and take care.